a rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but that beauty, a rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but
Welcome to episode 12 of Red Lens Podcast. We're going to have a great episode today, so why don't we just jump right in? I'm going to let you start a little bit by just telling us a little bit about who you are, where you live, and what you do, and so everyone can get to know our great guest today.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, Brad. First of all, I really appreciate your time. And thanks to everybody who's listening. My name is Andi Epperly. I'm a photojournalist for On-Site Public Media. I recently started my own little venture that I call Forward Photography. That's mostly so that I can take pictures of weddings and do portraits and make money so that I can continue doing my work for On-Site for free. Because somebody's got to pay for camera equipment. I live in Fridley. I've kind of lived all over the city quite a bit, though. I've bounced from South Minneapolis when I was a teenager to East St. Paul, Northeast Minneapolis, all the way up to Elk River, and then back down here to Fridley. So lived in quite a few places.
From Minneapolis to the suburbs to the exurbs to Yeah, so I'm interested to hear more about that. But I just wanted to pick up on one thing you mentioned. That's really cool. You said it's called Forward Photography. Is your sort of quote unquote business that you're
that's
the photography
like
brand.
Yeah, like that's my official photography brand. So like when I'm not going out and photo shoot and doing shoots for the community, I'm doing them for Forward. So yeah, Forward's my little side venture to help me pay for the shit that I need to keep doing community work. A bitch has got to eat. So and I need a new lens. I need a new mid-range lens. So I'm hoping that in the next couple of months, I'm working on some projects and I'm hoping that some of them come to fruition so that I can pick up a new mid-range lens and do some fun community work in the spring.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to ask you about some of your work and some of your lenses and all of that as we get going. But that's cool that you're doing not just photography for the passion of, just covering movements, but you're actually doing work and getting paid for it as well. So congrats on that.
Trying. We all know, every photographer knows, man. We say that, but we're all struggling to pay the bills for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about politics? Like, I'm interested to hear what your political journey's been that led you to where you are now, where you're spending so much time at protests. I mean, have you always had that revolutionary fire for justice that you have now, or how did that develop? I mean, I guess living out in places like Elk River, that might be a little unusual, or maybe that's how it developed. Tell me about it.
Well, I'm actually from Estes Park, Colorado, and it makes my heart beat a little bit faster. So I'm sorry if I get a little weird, but I was abused by a former police officer when I was 7. He was my stepdad. He tortured my sister and I for a day, and he ended up getting arrested. But the sheriff called the judge and asked him to go easy on my stepdad because my sister was 6, weren't physically harmed. So
wow.
That had a real impact on me. And I didn't understand it at the time. I was just angry because I think the conversation that does happen in the white community and in the Caucasian community is cops aren't your friend. So this thing happened to me when I'm young, and I grow up being told that if you need help, call the police. If you're lost, call the police. If somebody's hurting you, call the police. Well, that was the person who hurt me. And when the police got called on the police, they called the judge and said, no, it's fine.
They covered it up.
Yeah, they did. And the experience that you live and the experience that you're taught, when those things don't match up, it creates a huge internal conflict. And that wasn't the first moment that I had experienced abuse. That was one of many, even at 7 years old, that I had already experienced. And growing up, that conflict inside of me also began to envelop the abuse that I see out in the world. America has an abusive relationship with her people. That's what this is. And I see it I see it over and over and over again. You know, when cops say shit, when judges say that somebody deserved it, that when they exonerate a police officer, I don't hear he's innocent. I hear you made me do it. You made me do this to you. And I can't abide that. I can't. It's too close to my heart, and it hurts me to see other people out there hurting. So I was officially political after the Iraq War. When the Iraq War began happening, I didn't feel like it was fair for us to punish an entire nation of people for the actions of one man. And I didn't know at the time that America funded the Mujahideen and that all of those things in the Middle East were set up, that all of these things were predictable and preventable if the American government actually gave a shit about humanity. But I knew that something smelled weird, and I didn't have the education for it then, and I didn't have the words for it then, but I do now.
Wow. So thank you so much for sharing that. I imagine it must not be easy to talk about or share with the world, but yeah, it's those kinds of formative experiences. I mean, so it's not just like you read about war and injustice in a book, you know, you had real deep experience with it from very young age. Wow.
Yeah. My home was a war zone. It was, you know, I wonder often how I've survived. And maybe one day I'll share more with the community, but I do have to say that I think one of the things that really sits with me the most is the kindness of strangers. And I try to really focus on that in my work. You know, even at movements where I'm with people who I know don't like me, or I'm around people that I don't like, because there's certain people in the movement that, you know, not everyone's for you and you're not for everyone, and that's okay, but they still deserve to have a voice. So I try to really remember that you can't help people from a place of judgment. You have to help them from a place of kindness. And that I try to remind myself constantly that even though I'm not in the place that I used to be anymore, it's the kindness of strangers that got me here, and I need to continue paying that forward.
Yeah, for sure. That's powerful.
Thank you. I'm sorry I talk too much.
No, this is your time to talk.
I'm
just asking the questions, and I want you to talk. So yeah, okay. Don't apologize in this forum. Yeah, this is your space. Yeah, so that makes sense. Then I was going to ask, sort of following up, we were a couple of years ago in a place where there were protests happening almost every day, that most of them had hundreds, if not thousands of people at them, and tons of photographers. And now there's protests, not every day, there's protests pretty often, but they tend to be smaller. You know, movements kind of go up and down, right? It's not always the same. And there are fewer photographers and videographers out at most events. So, but you're still out there at a lot of things. So I was going to ask, what drives you to keep going when things are not as sexy as they were, where thousands of people are coming out every day? How do you keep that going?
I don't think I guess I'm a student of history. So I went into it knowing that even though everybody was saying things are going to change, I went into it knowing that we probably weren't going to achieve much at all. I was honestly doubtful about achieving a conviction of Derek Chauvin. I had my doubts about justice, and I still have my doubts about justice. And that's kind of what drives me, is we still haven't seen any change, you know? And if the cops have been killing somebody every 6 months since they killed George Floyd, what have we really done? You know, and that's kind of the thing that pushes me forward, is there is no material change for people. We can claim that there's legislative change, but people are still poor. They're still hungry. They're still unhoused. And there's still issues that need fighting and voices that need highlighting. There's still people out there suffering, and I can do something about that.
Seems like having both that personal experience of injustice and learning and studying history and understanding how these things happen, that the process of change is often back and forth. When you have a revolution or an upsurge, you get a backlash that's a reaction, and
Yep.
So you kind of expect that. And that's exactly, I think, what we're living through right now, where
Yep.
the narrative's completely changed from
Mm.
fighting racism to, out of control
CRT.
crime. We need more police,
Yeah.
But if your life experience is such that you understand that you can't just automatically trust police, or police aren't just there to do good necessarily, that it definitely, I think, must be able to be a way that helps to sort of, inoculate against that backlash.
Mm-hmm. Well, and my dad, before he passed away when I was 12, always really encouraged me to read books and educate myself. My mom and I spent time in the library constantly. So I was already very curious. That was already kind of an inherent part of who I am. And I think the things that I went through added injustice to that context, So my curiosity went from space and animals and, like dairy farming, I don't fucking know, to poverty, the root causes of poverty. And it happened very quickly, I think, when we moved from Colorado to Minnesota, and we went from being in a city where we were working class, but everybody else was rich. So the town was kind of forgiving of my family, because my mom, she was one of the people who kind of kept it moving. Then we moved to Woodbury, and I was bullied immediately. Immediately, people recognized that my mom sewed on patches to cotton sweaters, and we just did our own pop-up paint to make them fancy. They knew that we didn't have name brand clothes, and something about the way that they bullied me, just, it bothered me, because I was like, it's not my fault I'm poor,
Like, even at an age where you don't necessarily have the full analysis, you know
Mhm.
this just isn't right,
Yeah, exactly. It just, something about it wasn't right. And that was the result of, it's so weird because the adults in my life were so fucked up, but at the same time, they did such good things for me. Like, my dad was a really abusive person, but he also taught me how to be really emotionally aware. And my mom was extremely emotionally unavailable. So I kind of committed myself to being the opposite. And now I'm so sensitive that I literally cry on a daily basis. It's so it's weird. My parents formed me to be this, even though they're kind of fucked up, they formed me to be this person who really does give a shit. And that's what I'm trying to really, I'm trying to set that seed, or plant that seed into the minds of Zoomers, people who are about to have kids. Like, teach your kids kindness. You don't have to teach them politics right now. You can just teach them that when a police officer is talking to somebody unfairly, you can ask them, does that seem fair to you? Does that seem right to you? Especially if it's happening in a TV show. That's a
For
true
sure.
story that happened with us, with my bonus kid.
Oh, okay. So have you been involved in political movements in other ways besides photography? I mean, you mentioned the Iraq War. Did you go to protests back then? And yeah, what was that experience like?
No, I was 14 when the war started. Although there was a time when I was I was homeless when I was a teenager in downtown Minneapolis, and there were protests. There was like a couple of them, but one protest occupied Loring Park, and one was a pro marijuana protest. And I remember joining both of them, because I was just like, I looked at the signs, I was like, what the fuck's going on here, guys? Well, I ain't got shit to do, and they have food, so going that way, right? And I
The
remember
importance of having food at political events.
hey, you know what? Thanks for radicalizing me, I guess. Like, I also feeding me, just fucking feeding me. I was literally sleeping underneath a bridge, and these huge crowds of people walked by, and they didn't look at my mailbag full of clothes. They didn't look at my dirty hair or my hat or my gross jeans. They just looked at me and they said, "Do you want something to eat?" And there are so few moments like that in my life where someone just asked me what I needed and gave it to me without question and without expectation of something in return, too. I told you I cry every day.
Yeah, there's nothing bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot to get emotional about and cry about in the world today, for sure.
It's usually grateful tears. Usually.
Right on. So yeah, that's interesting that your introduction to protests was a very welcoming experience, which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily everybody's experience, but shows the importance of as organizers understanding that, sometimes if you go to a lot of protests, it sort of can feel like the same thing over and over again. Like, oh, everybody's already done this. What's the point? But you always have to remember there's that one person or few people who have never been there before. And this is could be life-changing for them. And always, trying to welcome new people and talk to people.
The faces always shift. To go back to your question, I informally started protesting at 13 or 14 when I was homeless downtown. And then after Jamar Clark was murdered, I started protesting after the police station occupation. I was 20, I think, 21, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit older, but I was old enough to not be scared to be alone at protests, or I was old enough where the fear wouldn't stop me from going, because I didn't have any friends who went with me. I would just go to the governor's mansion by myself. And the first 3 or 4 times, my heart was just like, boom, 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 boom. Because, you see the cops, you see the protesters, you see the people who are yelling at the cops, and you see the people who are yelling at the protesters. It can be kind of intimidating at first. But as I went and as I got older and more capable, just in every way possible, I guess, it became less scary, and it became more of a thing where I felt like I was at home. Like these were the people with whom I belonged.
That's awesome. So you talked about that feeling of when you're at a protest and there's potential conflict just below the surface or actual conflict. Certainly over the last couple of years, we've been at a lot of protests where that is a reality, whether it's the pro-Trump people at the governor's mansion or at the Capitol with counter protesters, or when there's protests against police brutality and then, the Trump people show up, or just the police or just drivers driving
just macing somebody from an SUV as it's driving down an intersection. Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, I assume you're referring to that incident, the cop who then claimed PTSD and got $150,000 and now sells bananas in Arizona, frozen bananas.
Yep. Where's that banana stand at? For reasons, I have questions.
Wild. Yeah. So I'd be interested to hear some of your experiences over the last couple of years, especially when we've been in a very tense period and a lot of conflict at protests, whether it's from cops mass arresting people or let's hear some stories.
Sure. So conflict has definitely been something that I've both witnessed and because I am a dumbass, I have also instigated. So I'm not scared of these guys, right? What I'm scared of is other people getting hurt or me hurting somebody. I'm trained in martial arts. I'm not afraid to get in someone's face and potentially fight them. I'm afraid of seriously injuring them. So I have seen several conflicts, and I think the scariest one was in Stillwater, a protest after a Somali woman in a hijab was eating ice cream actually, strike that. I'm not sure if she was Somali. I just know that she was a woman in hijab. She was eating ice cream with her daughter in an ice cream shop in Stillwater, and a bunch of bikers from a well-known white supremacist biker bar there literally chased her out of the ice cream bar and around Stillwater. And she had to give her 3-year-old baby or her 2-year-old baby to some kids who were just working at a place nearby, and called the cops, and they had to hide. She hid. She gave her kid to a stranger to keep her kid safe. How terrifying is that? So we went, there was a protest, and then there was conflict at that protest. So we held another protest, and I can't remember which protest it happened, but one of them, as we were, going through Stillwater, there was this group of middle-aged Trumpers. And I used to have a bunch of film of it. My car was broken into a while ago, and one of my hard drives was stolen. So,
oh no,
a bunch of so that footage is gone forever, which sucks because it was great. It was great footage. I'm my heart is on a hard drive somewhere out there, and whoever broke into my car and stole my shit, you make it so hard to be a prison abolitionist. I swear to God, I want my shit back. I just want my photos. That's all. Anyway, I have footage of these guys like harass, just kind of like hanging out in the perimeter, and the cops are like shaking their hands, and nobody there was surprised by that. But the protest goes back down towards the river and towards the bridge. And we're kind of finishing up, and there's probably 75 to 100 protesters left who are kind of just milling around the park there. And these two older guys come in. One has a cane, and they're both wearing guns on their hips openly. And I remember me
So
and maybe
not concealed carry. This is open
No,
carry. Yeah.
just open
Stillwater is a
carry.
very right-wing area. Yeah.
Yep,
For people who
yep.
don't know that are listening.
There was another guy drinking a beer openly on a bench, and I started filming him and asking him questions. I'm so sad I don't have that anymore. I really wish I could put that out. But anyway, so those guys came in with their guns, and they started trash talking. They started trying to walk through people to try to, like, shoulder bump people and intimidate. And me and maybe like 8 to 10 other people, we kind of formed a wall. And I remember I had my camera already going, and somebody just said, somebody film this, somebody film this. And I stepped in and I said, I got it, I'm recording. And I stepped kind of right behind somebody. And we just started chasing these guys out. We created a little wall, and we just said, nah, fuck you, bitch. Like, you don't own this. You're just a white guy whose family came here maybe fucking 70 years ago from Germany. Go fuck yourself, So we chased him out. And then once most of the protesters left, we kind of walked back, and they followed us back, and we're still talking shit. So I just started talking shit about the guy's gun. And I asked him what kind of handle it was. I was like, man, that handle's dirty as fuck. You're supposed to clean that after you go shooting, right? And he was offended. He said, oh, I just got it off of Amazon. And I looked at him, I said, well, it looks like shit. And then
they're not expecting protesters who are on the left to know anything about guns, right?
Yeah,
like they think we're all a bunch of snowflakes and whatever.
Right. Yeah. Well, and look at me, I very much look like a well-meaning white liberal woman. I very much look like if you say the words AK-47, I'm going to clutch pearls, but I'm the opposite. So I started making fun of them. And then I had painted little Black Lives Matter cards to put around Stillwater as art to just like drop. And I had put a bunch of them on their cars earlier, because they had just left their cars unattended like idiots.
So you could see which cars were theirs. And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, you guys are so fucking dumb. Like, your OPSEC is horrible. Anyway, so they're like, this guy is, we're standing there. There's still a few protesters around, and this guy's hand keeps going down towards his gun. And I'm just kind of thinking to myself, like, shit. What can I do? I got to make sure this guy's hand can't like access his gun quickly. And so I handed him one of my little cards. I said, here, I made this for you. Why don't you take it? And he didn't want to take it. So I said, here, I'll put it next to your gun. And I went to go put it right behind his gun, and he reached, and then his hand that was right next to his gun reached up, and he grabbed it, and he held it for the rest of the time. And at the time, I felt like victorious. I was like, yeah, I shit talked these guys. Now he's got my Breonna Taylor Matters fucking card thing, And then I went home and I rewatched the footage, and I thought to myself, this guy could have fucking shot all of us. He could have shot all of us. He could have killed me, and nothing would have stood in his way, and nothing would have happened. And in that moment, I was kind of fucked up. It took me a few days to like kind of recover from what I had done to myself in a way. And in that scenario, I feel good about it now, years later, after processing it, because what I did and what me and a bunch of other people did is make sure that the majority of the folks were safe before these guys could come back. Mm-hmm. And I acted kind of dumb after that, but it's what it is. So that was kind of one of the scarier moments. I scared the shit out of my partner recently at a Drag Story Hour event, because I am queer, and these fucking Proud Boys and this Drag Story Hour shit is like, it eats at me. And anytime I see Proud Boys, I kind of fucking lose it a little bit. And I made a really dumb decision at the last thing we went to, where when we got to the library, I didn't think about my outfit that day, aside from like, I need to be warm. So I was wearing a black and white Los Campeones flannel and a yellow shirt that said "fuck around and find out" and had a burning cop car on it. And I think they saw the black and yellow, and they saw that I was a white girl, and I was walking up to them. I was like confidently walking up to them. I think they thought I was on their side initially, and then I stepped right. I walked my little ass, my little 5'1", 140-pound ass into the middle of this group of 10 to 15 Proud Boys, many of whom are considerably larger than me, and all of whom are covering their faces with the exception of one or two of them. I just said to them, wow, I'm glad we finally figured out a way to get you ugly fucks to put on masks. And that's when they realized I wasn't a friendly. So
are those the Proud Boys official or unofficial colors that they usually use?
Black and yellow.
Black and yellow.
Yep.
Okay.
Black and yellow. Mm-hmm.
And you hadn't done that intentionally. That just happened to be what you were wearing.
Just I thought about what I wanted to wear that day, and I have a shirt that's got a burning cop car on it. And and that's kind of my attitude, is fuck around and find out. I take it very seriously, and I'm not afraid. There's nothing that any white supremacist or fascist or anyone, there's nothing that any of these people can do to me that men haven't already done. Or my mom. My mom, you can't be meaner to me than my mom was. Like, that's not fucking possible. So I kind of enjoy going to protests and talking shit to these guys, because they talk shit about me, and I'm mean. I'm a mean person, and I'm smart. So I dig in, and I dig in hard, and they can't even fucking compete. I love it. I love just absolutely destroying them. I love hurting their feelings.
So I'm trying to remember. I can't remember. Were you out at any of the Dante Wright protests after he was murdered out in Oakland Center?
Yep. Yes, I was. I have a lot of interesting footage from BCPD. I think one of my favorite photos is during the day. I think it was like a Thursday, and there's just a whole crowd of people in front of the station there. Everybody's kind of in the middle of the street. They're all kind of milling around. Some people have gas masks on. You can tell there had been some activity earlier in the day. And in the middle of the photo, there's this like young Black woman, and she's got an unopened bottle of Hennessy just raised up in the air.
And you caught that photo?
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't even notice that she had the bottle of Hennessy, because sometimes with my camera, there's just so much going on, and I have ADHD, so it's just like, it's almost overwhelming with how much stimulation is there, that I just take my camera and I hold the button down and I go, because you never know. Sometimes you might catch something crazy, like a gal holding up a fucking Hennessy bottle in the middle of a protest. Like, I love it. I love it, because protest is not supposed to be something that's scary, and it's supposed to be joyous for us. It's an act of resistance. So I think there needs to be a certain amount of joy in it. It can't always be a fucking funeral. We got to celebrate the people who are alive sometimes too.
There's that old saying that, revolution is the festival of the oppressed,
Yes.
That's very true.
I love that. I've never heard that. Who said that?
Oh, I don't know. Just some old saying.
Mm-hmm.
Read it somewhere, seen it quoted. Mm-hmm. But it's also true, like during strikes, when workers for the first time break out of their day-to-day routine and realize they can do that and realize their power. It's just there's that joy too. Mm-hmm. It's, while at the same time everyone's angry and determined and pissed off and all of that, there's also this joy, and I saw that a lot during the teacher strike, and, the couple times I've been on strike too. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think real. We felt that in the early days of George Floyd too. The community Absolutely. Shared a sense of urgency and a sense of need for change and growth that somehow evaporated over the last couple of years. But we were there. We were there for a moment, and I think we can get it back.
Oh, absolutely. Like we were talking about before, where these things sort of happen and movements happen in waves, and there's sort of like a peak, and then all the contradictions that were there that are momentarily sort of put aside so that everyone unites. Those contradictions reemerge over time, and political differences, personal beefs, all of that sort of intervenes, and not to mention the most important thing, the state sort of fomenting all that conflict and confusion. Yeah,
exactly.
So you also did a lot of photos this summer and fall at the abortion rights and reproductive rights protests that started when that leak happened, saying that the Supreme Court was going to overturn Roe versus Wade. what was your experience at those protests?
It was a good experience. They were good rallies, I guess, marches. There was a clear message. There was good organizing by the UMN SDS. A lot of the student groups did a really good job of gathering large groups of people together. And I was really heartened and pleased to see so many white women specifically out in the streets, because I wanted everybody else to feel like they could stay home. I remember at a protest a couple of years ago, a young Black woman said that she didn't want to be protesting. She wanted to be at home drinking tea and listening to jazz music. And I remember looking around at the women's marches in 2016 and wondering where those women were, those women who listen to jazz music and drink tea. And I feel the same wonder when I'm at these pro-abortion protests. Where are these women? I hope they feel like they can rest this one out. I hope white women continue turning out, because this is such an important issue. And I think because of how many white women are in Congress right now, like I think it's really like we really need to be the ones to be like in the husband's ears and in the senator's ears. I was happy to see a lot of white women out at the abortion protests, but there was also a big fucking part of me that was like, where the fuck have you been? Why is this the only thing that you're out here for? You know, there was thousands of women out for the abortion march. And when it comes to trans rights or gay rights, when I went to the candlelight vigil at the saloon this last month, where are you? Those white women weren't there. And I find it really frustrating, because I am a white woman, and it's like, well, I care. What the fuck is your problem? Why don't you? You know, like, you don't have to have the direct experience. And I don't know. I don't know what the fucking problem is. You know, like, what are you scared of? What's stopping you? I don't know.
Or we do know what the problem is. It's the deep white supremacy that exists, and patriarchy, and anti-trans, and all of those things that have to constantly be battled, but also the reality that, and you've talked a lot about white women, and I could certainly say a lot more about white men who overwhelmingly vote for Trump and are need a lot more work, but yeah, I think in a way it's those are just dynamics that are larger than what we can impact in one day or 1 week. It's sort of a lifetime of struggle, but it's on organizers, it's on us to sort of win people over one at a time, and also when there are moments like the George Floyd uprising, when suddenly you do see a majority of white people being like, ooh, that's too far, and there's always those trolls, but for that moment it was like, I think they did a poll and the majority of people in the country thought it was right to burn down the precinct, and it's like, that's incredible. And then of course the ruling class gets to work to sort of cut that apart and drive that down to the memory hole. But
and now there's beautiful artwork on the Target that got burned down. There's beautiful murals of Black Lives Matter. Oh yeah. And
not like from the movement, but like the things that they put up.
Well, they hired artists from the community and stuff. But the thing about that Target on Lake Street in particular, the reason that Target burned down in particular was because after cops were macing people in the initial protests, after cops were, like abusing people, protesters went into that Target to shop for supplies, and that Target refused to sell them medical equipment, like milk of magnesia. Was it milk of magnesia? I don't know, but the thing you use to clear mace out of your eyes, basically. Besides milk. So they wouldn't sell that. And then now they want to put up Black Lives Matter artwork on their fucking building. It's like, so if this shit happens again, are you going to sell us milk this time? Or can I just fucking take it as like, hey, remember, Pepperidge Farm remembers, I'm just going to take this milk. Cool.
Yeah, capitalism has been very good at sort of destroying its opposition and then co-opting the veneer of the opposition.
Yes,
that's definitely an example of that.
That's I forgot what they call it, but I know for the gay community they call it rainbow washing. When Target washing, is like, or pink, exactly. So that's actually something that occupies my mind constantly, is capitalism and how easily it absorbs our movements and our words. You can buy a t-shirt that says Black Lives Matter anywhere, fucking anywhere. But like, what has actually materially changed?
Yeah, it's like with land acknowledgements, now everyone
Mhm.
does a land
Yeah,
acknowledgement, but
right.
the University of Minnesota land grant institution, where was that land granted from? They don't want to
Right.
talk about that.
Fort Snelling, something, 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 something.
hmm Well, we've been talking for a while now, and we've
Yeah,
touched on photography here and there, but let's dive a little deeper into photography specifically.
sure.
I'm interested to hear about your photography journey. How did you get into photography, and how did you end up doing it so much?
Yeah, I actually, like a lot of photographers, I started in high school. I went to St. Anthony High School in ninth grade for about 6 months, and I did not like it. I hated everybody there. I had gone from Northeast Middle School, which at the time had a reputation, to St. Anthony High School, and the culture was so different that I didn't really know how to handle myself. I had already experienced one huge culture shock moving from Colorado to Minnesota, and then going from Northeast Middle School to St. Anthony was yet another one. It was only in the opposite direction. I kept on
Sort
bouncing.
of like
So
the metaphorical, like the other side of the tracks kind of
yeah,
situation.
exactly. Yep. And I really didn't make any friends. I didn't fit in with anybody. Nobody really liked me. So I found comfort in the dark room. I found a camera, and I went around taking pictures of the land because I remember I was missing the mountains. I was missing the mountains so much.
Oh
And
man, coming from Colorado to Minnesota, yeah, that's a brutal transition.
yeah, hmm I still miss it. I don't get to go back very often. I deeply, deeply, deeply miss the mountains. And one day I will go back there. That's where I belong. But not until we're done with our work here. So, but yeah, I got into it in high school in St. Anthony, and then eventually I ended up becoming homeless midway through. I think it was like ninth grade or something. I don't know. I ended up becoming homeless again, and I kind of lost contact with photography until I was going to school at this place called MTS in South Minneapolis. And they had a dark room there as well. And I just kind of like threw myself into it. And I've never really stopped taking photos since. It's been on and off, but I've always been a creative. So it's something where I cycle through, I would cycle through taking photos for a while, and then I'd go to drawing, and then I'd go to painting, and then I'd go to like, crocheting or whatever. It just
Oh,
kind of
cool.
depended on where my
So
life
you
was
so you
at the
started with
time.
film photography then, huh?
Yep. Yep.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
It got expensive there towards, towards the, I don't know, 2010s, I guess. Because I wanted to keep doing film photography for a while there because DSLRs just didn't have the same quality as
hmm
film. But now with mirrorless technology and everything, it's all so good that you literally can't tell the difference anymore.
For sure, yeah. But that's true. The early digital cameras, when you look back at how many megapixels they were and all this stuff like
hmm
that, it was still a very new technology, yeah, and it
hmm
didn't have the same feel as film.
Yep. Yeah, it was definitely different.
What do you remember? What kind of camera you used back then with film?
Oh, it was a Nikon for sure. I don't
Nikon.
remember what model it was, but it was a Nikon. And my great grandpa had a Polaroid that I was obsessed with. I loved the Polaroid. I loved being able to take a picture and like see instantly what it was. It was like Christmas every single time. You just shake it. You're like, what's it gonna be?
Shake it like a
You know?
Polaroid
Yeah,
picture.
yeah, exactly. Right.
That's awesome. So were
Mhm,
you doing black and white mainly then at that point? I
mhm.
assume if you were in the dark room, probably at school.
Yes. Yeah, black and
Most high
white
schools aren't
and
set up for color.
no, and MTS did not have the budget for color. They kind of put all their budget into the music studio, so whatever.
And what kind of stuff were you taking pictures of then?
I was doing a lot of landscapes. I
Okay.
didn't really have a lot of friends. I've never really been a person that's had a lot of friends, so I didn't really have any people to take pictures of, and I wasn't comfortable just going out into the street and like taking photos now, which is something that takes a lot of time to build that comfort to just be able to step into a space and be like, "Hey, stranger, here's my giant camera in your face. Click, click."
hmm
So
Yeah,
most
that's why I started a project about 2 years ago now to do a 100 Strangers project to exactly to get out of my comfort zone, because I wouldn't want to go up and talk to someone I don't know and ask if I can take their picture.
Right.
You figure everyone's going to say, no, get the hell out of here, you creep, but it really has been, I haven't finished it yet because COVID first, there was just not many people out, and then I'm just, busy, but I will finish it eventually. I'm about 60 something photos in.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that project because one, just to practice, getting more practice doing portraits, but also just that part, that getting out of your comfort zone and like being able to go up and talk to people on the street and say, hey, I'm doing this project. Can I take your picture? And it's kind of amazing. Most people I've asked say yes. And that may be sort of a self-selective, you pick people who seem likely to be more open, but yeah.
Do you just kind of say, hey, can I take your picture? And then they're like, and they stand there and
I've kind of tried different ways of doing it, but usually what I'll do is like I'll have on my phone, like the gallery where I can show them like the pictures I've done so far of other people. And so I'll just approach someone and say, I'll have my camera in my hand and I'll just say, hey, I'm a street photographer. I love doing street portraits. And I usually try to point out something about them that caught my attention. Like, your hat is really cool. I would love to get a picture of you, and the light's really good right now. Would you be willing to do a photo for this project? And here's some of the other ones I've done. And some people say no, but very few do. It's kind of amazing.
I love your photos. Those are some of my favorites of yours.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And I need to get back to that. I haven't been doing as many. Do you have any, so you do or did landscape photos? Do you still do that? Or are there other types of photography that you love to do now that you're doing besides protests?
Yeah, no, anytime I travel, I try to bring my camera because I am of the earth. I am definitely an earthy girl. I'm a Taurus, so of course. And
I'm not good with astrology. Is that an earth sign, I assume?
Yeah, it is. Okay. I'm only like halfway believing it, but it's kind of fun anyway. So yeah, and growing up in the mountains, like I just definitely have a special connection, I think, with nature, and I love just capturing that beauty. So the other thing that I also take portraits and family photos and wedding photos and animal photos, all kinds of that kind of fun stuff. But I think the most interesting recent photo shoot I did was at this place called Aerial Affinity. It's a pole and aerial studio, and I took photos at a student showcase where the students were showing the routines that they had developed either on the silks that like hang from the ceiling or on the pole. And they had people that were ranging. They had little, like 7-year-old kids that were working on the silks and that were like learning how to like flip from the ceiling, which was really neat to see. All the way up to a woman who was 57 years old on the silks, and she could do a full split in the air. It was really beautiful and interesting. Awesome. And I loved taking photos of these very incredibly athletic women who had come to this place to seek healing. And you could see how happy they were. Even with their eyes closed, you could see the peace in their soul. It was really fun to capture that.
That's awesome. So do you have any like photography projects? Like I mentioned this 100 Strangers project or things like that aren't necessarily for money or for work, but just projects that you're doing on your own?
Every once in a while I put out calls for people where I'm like, I just want to take pictures. Just message me and tell me what you want to do. And I recently did one around Halloween where I took photos of my friend and her daughter, which was really super fun because her daughter's like 2 or 3 and she just never sits down. So it was a real challenge to take photos of her kiddo, but it was good at the same time. I've taught swim lessons for 14 and a half years. So I'm capable of directing kids in like a sports scenario, but with a kid, I'd never met her daughter before. So with a stranger where this kid is clearly very energetic and asking her to sit down is just not going to succeed. It was a challenge getting a good photo of her. And that's good. It's good to have that kind of experience where it's not just sitting down and being like, okay, on 3, 1, 2, 3, cheese. It's a,
like from the old days where someone's literally sitting for a portrait as they're painted,
right. Yeah, exactly. No, you have to be able to capture that.
A really, really high shutter speed, I guess, if they're constantly moving so that you don't get blurry photo.
I think I took like 800 pictures and like 200 of like maybe 174 were good, like not blurry. And that was before I even went through and we're like, okay, which ones are in focus? Like which ones
Yeah.
actually look good? It's just like, all right, out of 800, 170 something where like you could see her and it was fine.
Wow. Amazing.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And then I did a project around Halloween with my bonus kid where we just went out in the woods and took pictures. We did like a photo shoot of him in his costume out in the Long Lake area. He had a Grim Reaper costume and he just wanted to be creepy. He's a preteen, so he wanted to have a fun, creepy photo shoot. And I
Sounds
was like, you know
awesome.
what? I was like, this is a good idea. I should do this next year. Next year, I'm gonna be like, all right, if you want to take fun photos with your kid in their Halloween costume, I got you.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Mhm.
Last year, I didn't do it this year, but there's like some different Facebook groups of like models and photographers that do like meetups, where people just do work for free. You take the photos for free,
Oh,
you give them to the models for free. But there was a Halloween one last year that was a lot of fun. With,
mhm.
some sort of scary stuff. It was in a park where there was a cemetery right next to it. So
Oh, that'd
there's
be
some sort of
fun. I would
cemetery
love that.
shots and
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm a goth kid, so I'm definitely looking for more
All
like
right.
goth shit to do photo. I just did a Krampus photo shoot at Walnut Brewery last week
Okay.
for an event. I just kind of showed up and I was like, "Can I take pictures?" And they were like, "Yeah, cool." So uh,
That's
that
awesome.
was really kind of goth and fun. But I would really love to find more like pole and aerial folks to take photo shoots of. That was really, really, really cool.
So I'll ask the obligatory question about gear and
Mhm.
settings. Some people love to know what kind of cameras, what kind of lenses, what settings, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So what kind of camera and lenses do you use? Do you use like the same thing for everything, or when you're at protests specifically and for portraits, what do you use? I'll ask that.
Yeah, I just actually switched camera rigs. I was working on an old Olympus EM10 Mark II, just an old tourist camera that I had picked up, 10 years ago, and I just haven't been able to afford to buy a professional camera until recently. So I just switched to a Sony A7R3. I picked up a used body from National Camera, so thanks to those guys. And mostly I use a 70 to 300 Tamron f4 to like f6, something like that. It's an okay lens. I'm not super happy with it. The range is great, but I need a mid-range lens. So, and my other lens that I use for portraitures, I have a 16 to 35 f4. And again, I would really love a fixed length. I prefer fixed length for portraits. I'm really hoping to pick up a 55 or an 85 millimeter
Hmm.
Sony, but money is a little tight. So
Yeah,
we'll see
those
how quickly that happens.
lenses for mirrorless cameras are just bonkers. But yeah,
It's
85
rough.
millimeter. I love 85 millimeter for portraits
Mhm.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's I almost the salesman at NatCam had me like this close, but the lens was like $600 and I was like, ugh,
And that's the
I don't
Tam.
have
Is that the Sony or the
that was
Tamron?
the Sony. It was a
Yeah.
Sony f2.8. So
Uh-huh.
he showed me
That's the one I have. Yeah.
yeah, it's a beautiful lens. I'm gonna get it, but I'm gonna get it used. I'm not paying full price for it.
Yeah, lenses used is definitely the way to go. I mean,
Hmm.
if you buy it from like a reputable place, if it's just some random person on Facebook Marketplace, I may not, because it could have like problems, could have,
Yeah.
mold or fungus or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, no reason not to buy used, 'cause especially with the prices. Like the
Mhm.
Sony lenses are the ones I'm most familiar with, and those are just outrageous. But
They
yeah,
are.
almost everything I have is Tamron or Samyang because those are obviously a lot cheaper. And
Yes.
the Tamrons, I mean, the quality is so good. I just love those.
Mhm. Yeah, I get really good results with my 780-300. It's a good lens. I will keep it, and I'll probably use it for vacations more than I use it for like street shooting once I get a different lens. I think for like protest photography, really the max that I need is a 200. So like maximum. But eventually it'd be nice to have two camera bodies so I could just have one long range and one fixed length and just boop boop.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of photojournalists out there that are like legit, they like work for like National fucking Geographic and stuff. And they have that and I don't. So some
Yeah.
big dude named Max made fun of my equipment recently. And I was like, dude, fuck you. You work for the fucking government.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can take great photos with anything, so
Mhm.
whatever. But I did start to do that over the last couple of years bringing two cameras to protests where I have one with the Tamron's a 70 to 180, to make it cheaper instead of 70 to 200. And I started having that on one, and then on the other one, 17 to 28. So I don't have the mid range. I leave that out and just do the wide and then the really long. And funny, because when I first started going to protests, I would just bring like the 28 to 70, or is it 70 or 75? I don't remember, because you can do a lot with that. Then over time, both me and Phil Ward kind of, he, I think said he does the same thing when I interviewed him.
Yeah.
Where you really want those sort of much wider shots, and then the distance to be able to get like speakers or someone from sort of farther away.
Yeah, I remember Phil's two giant. He always had the one, was it Canon? I don't know. He always had one that had a giant lens on it. And I was like, bro, are you trying to take pictures of Afghanistan from here with that thing? Like, what's the deal?
And now you have the 300 millimeters. So, hey.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly.
It's not as big, but yeah.
I know, right? Now, anytime I miss the mountains, I can just be like, all right.
There they are.
There we go. There's Pikes Peak right there. Got it.
Yeah. That's cool. Anything else you want to say about gear? Anything else that you like to use, or besides just the camera and lens?
Yeah, that's mostly what I have, honestly. I really don't have a lot of gear. Transferring from Olympus to Sony has been kind of expensive. And honestly, I do want to say, though, I want to give a shout out to my partner for that, because my camera broke after a DFL volunteer rally. It was a cold night, and the next day I went to go use my camera at the announcement party for the election, and my Olympus just took a shit. I'm pretty sure the cold weather killed it, and I couldn't take pictures of the election party that night too much, so we ended up just leaving. And I remember we were on the way out, and I just cried. I just broke down crying, because I had this other gig for Robin for Ward 2 like the following Monday, and it was like my first like real thing that I had done, I guess, for that somebody had like actually requested me specifically. They'd messaged me. It wasn't just something that I showed up and said, hey, can I like take pictures and send you a Dropbox link? No, they reached out for me. So I felt special. And then my fucking camera breaks.
Oh man.
And I was so distraught because I'm poor. And my partner ended up being the one who sat me down and was like, if you need help, just let me know. And I've been in long-term relationships before, and I've never had anybody like see that this is something that is really, really, really important to me, and then step in to do the right thing. This is the first time I've been in a relationship like that. And I just want to tell my guy, Chris, that you're fucking awesome, and I'm never letting you go.
Yeah, just to have that kind of support, there's nothing like that for sure.
It's been a big change. There was a while during the protests in the early George Floyd days where I would come to 3 or 4, and I would have to take like a couple weeks off from rallies and actions, because I didn't have that support at home. Every time I went home, I was catching shit from the guy I was married to at the time. And my family wasn't supportive. I didn't have anybody in my corner. I just had a bunch of people that were punishing me for standing up for what was right. And I kind of said, fuck all of you guys. In like 2021, 2022, I went no contact with my family, and I've been supported by my partner throughout this last year, and it's made a huge, huge, huge difference. So to any of my activist friends out there, if you're feeling depressed and you don't have social community support, fucking find me. I'll be that person for you. You need that. You have to have that to do this work. It's vital.
Yeah, for sure. So this is not a great transition, but
it's okay.
Where do you go from that? But yeah, let's talk about some other talents and passions besides photography.
Sure.
The first time that we met was not shooting photos at a protest. It was a different kind of shooting at a gun range.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like, you made reference to it before, but when did you get into shooting, or, going to the range? And, a lot of people don't associate progressive politics with guns, since, so many liberals talk about gun control so much. But there is on the left a long tradition of armed self-defense, from native resistance to colonization to the Black Liberation Movement and armed slave rebellions, all the way to the Black Panther Party, et cetera, and Puerto Rican independence movement. large labor rebellions like the Battle of Blair Mountain. So that's really historically the left has not been anti-gun in the way that a lot of people perceive it now. So just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So I definitely identify as a leftist. I'm I guess formally I consider myself an anarcho-communist. So I'm definitely pro-gun. But I'm only pro-gun in the context of America. I don't really honestly believe that human beings need weapons of war just like hanging out in your fucking like closet, down the hall. Here's my bowling trophy. Here's my weapon machine war thing that can kill 116 people in 3 minutes. I just don't feel like that's a normal thing. But we don't live in a society that makes room for that. We don't live in a reality that allows for pacifism. So I'm really supportive of that and of gun ownership, specifically in marginalized communities. And we met because we met after the protest in Kenosha, where Kyle Rittenhouse killed 3 people. He murdered 3 people.
That's right.
Shortly after that, a lot of photojournalists started getting bulletproof vests. I think a lot of folks started arming themselves. And another journalist named Emma invited me along because I was kind of like expressing some oh shit feelings after that happened. A friend of ours was there, another photojournalist, and I'm sure you know who I'm referring to. I don't know if they want me to put this out there, but seeing how much it impacted that person really made me want to put myself in a position where I could protect myself and I could protect other people if this ever happened. And honestly, I wanted to put myself in a position where I wouldn't be afraid to run into the line of fire. At the time of my life, I didn't really care if I lived or died. So I was just mostly focusing on like, all right, if this goes down, what the fuck are you going to do? What's the thing? What's the plan? You need to have at least a plan,
Mm-hmm.
So we met at the gun range and we started learning how to shoot. And it brought back, memories from my dad. My dad was a sharpshooter and an expert marksman in the military. And he didn't really let us mess with his guns all that much. My uncle still has his guns, but he always really emphasized, the fact that it was important to know how to shoot and to know how to operate a gun and to keep yourself safe. He always, always, always hammered on safety. It's not about fun. AR-15s are super fun to shoot, but it's not about fun.
Right.
It's about protection. It's about safety.
Yeah, I agree that at a bare minimum, because like you pointed out, we're in a country where it's just flooded with guns. They're everywhere. It's seriously problematic if you don't even know how to use one or if you're afraid to be around one. They're just everywhere. And to not know how to respond in a situation where, there are guns and there's just so many mass shootings and then targeted shootings at queer nightclubs and, that keep fucking happening. And, like you mentioned, Kyle Rittenhouse at the Black Lives Matter protest in Milwaukee and all the protests we went to where there were Trump supporters openly carrying and, it just becomes a very real thing.
Boogaloo Boys at George Floyd Square, Yeah. I mean, at the very least, you should be comfortable with knowing where a safety is on a gun. Because if you are in a scenario where you have to take a weapon from somebody, you need to be able to make sure that you can hit the safety and that you can remove the ammunition from the weapon.
Exactly.
Those are the chamber and the mag.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
At the very least.
No, I agree. And you have some other talents too that I've seen you post about on social media. You posted some photos from the summer from what looked like a competition of the American Pool Players Association. So what's up with that? Are you like a pool shark or what's going on with that?
Yeah, I played with played leagues with the APA and I qualified to go to nationals twice. Last year I went with my women's team. I'm actually wearing the hoodie right now. I can show you real quick. We're called the Valkyrie.
Oh wow.
that was my name. I picked out that name. Oh, the back is even better. Hang on.
I see the 8-ball.
Yep, and then like the Valkyrie on the.
Oh, yep.
Yep, there you go.
It was blurry and then it came into focus.
Yeah, sorry about that. So that team actually kind of fizzled out, but I am a pool player. I've been shooting since I was 17, and it's something that I've always kind of it's a meditative thing for me. It's something that I've always gone back to when life gets hard, because pool is that moment when you're at the table, you're aiming, and you're just feeling your body. You're just feeling where your body's at and what your body's doing. And then you breathe in and you breathe out and you take the shot. And that's it. And for that moment, that's all there is. There's nothing, there's no great injustice weighing down on your shoulders. There's only you and the table and the game.
You have to be able to clear your mind and just be
Yep.
focused for that moment.
Just be right there. Yep, you have to. You can't be thinking about anything else. You'll miss every single time.
So you played in national competitions, you said?
Yeah, I made it to several national competitions. I've won, my team has won several, I guess, like seasons. I got a ton of trophies up there. I'm okay. I'm like, when you pit me up against other players, I'm all right. You know, I'm a 62 in my M8 leagues. So I'm like a little bit up there, but you know, some of the guys that are out there are like 95s or 112s or whatever the fuck. So I'm trying to get better.
Do they have separate competitions by gender? You know, you said you have a women's team, or is it just your team happens to be all women?
They do. They have women's leagues. They have women's tournaments, and then they also have tournaments where you have to be a male-female combo. So I guess it's like, it's okay. There's still a lot of like bullshit in the pool league zone, especially because I'm with the kind of gal that I am. I don't really take a lot of shit, and I've been in this community for a super long fucking time. So some of these guys either don't talk to me at all, or they get upset when I give them their shit back, you know? Actually had a guy do that recently, like on Wednesday night. Or no, it wasn't Wednesday, today's Wednesday. It was on Sunday night. This guy thought he was losing, and instead of just like giving up and shaking my hand, he took his cue and he swiped all the balls across the table. And it was like, I still had like 5 balls left. I was like, bro, there's still a significant chance that I could lose here. It could happen, you know, even the best people lose, even the best people miss. So, yeah. But he didn't want to fucking do that. He didn't want to lose. And he didn't say anything about me being a woman. So who knows? But there's definitely like
that kind of, I don't want to lose to a girl kind of mindset.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So, and especially when it's like, there's this weird thing where men in the pool hall don't care if they lose to like feminine girls who are like, oh my God, girl rules. Yeah. But you know, when a warrior bitch steps up to the table and I break and 3 balls go in and I run the rest of the rack, they start getting pissed off, you know? It's like, sorry, man, I fucking catch up. Don't get mad at me. But yeah. So that's one of the things. I also do stand-up comedy, or I used to anyway.
Oh, I was just about to wrap up, but now we got to talk about that. Yeah.
Sorry, surprise you. Yeah, I did stand up for a couple years, and I'm still friends with quite a few folks that run mics. And one of these days, I'm going to get back to it. I just, you know, when COVID hit, I stopped feeling funny, and I kind of found myself in this like really low place of like existential dread. But that's kind of how it goes for comedians. You kind of just go through this phase of life where you're like, wow, everything sucks. And then you start kind of looking at it and you're like, yeah, but it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny how it sucks. You know what's kind of funny? The fact that I'm white and I have a shitty credit score. How did I get here? There's no reason. I had everything going for me. I'm even pretty. What happened? I fucked up. That's what happened here. This is my fault.
Yeah, you know, that's another sort of, I think, completely wrong stereotype is that conservatives say, oh, like, people on the left aren't funny, you know, they have no sense of humor. And, you know, because all they can picture comedy is punching down, you know, like making fun of women or making fun of queer people or trans people, you know, like Dave Chappelle kind of shit. And, you know, they just can't conceive of anything else being funny. But there's so much good stand-up now, I think, that is progressive or even like borderline revolutionary that, I love it. Yeah.
Hari Kondabolu is one of my favorites. And then Mateo Lane is fantastic. They're two really, really wonderful folks.
I don't know a lot of stand-up, but I don't know if you've heard of Taylor Tomlinson. She's gotten pretty big and she's coming to Minneapolis soon, but she has a whole like Netflix thing up now that she deals with like mental health. She deals with sex. She deals with all this stuff that, you know, from like a feminist perspective, from, you know, a very, very great perspective, and she's super funny, and so it's
Yeah.
just, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm starting to feel funny again. I can't wait to get out there and start telling jokes, because your jokes really, so the way that a comedian tells jokes, or the jokes that they tell, really informs you about their experience and about their perspective. And I think Dave Chappelle's jokes inform us that he's hanging out with rich white people way too goddamn much. Like I was listening to him and the Elon Musk booing thing, every time he responded to the audience who was booing, he was like punching down on class. He was like, oh, these are just the poor people. Oh, these are just the people that you fired from Twitter. And it's really indicative of like, you can only make a certain amount of people laugh, and the only people who really laugh at that kind of shit are the people who want to laugh at Dave Chappelle. If I did that at Comedy Corner Underground, if I made fun of poor people at Comedy Corner Underground, I'd probably be fucking blacklisted, But I think there is a lot of really good comedy coming out, and a lot of it is really revolutionary. And there are a lot of funny things about our lives. Like, leftists are funny. Being like, I'm coming out as bisexual as a 36-year-old. I'm 36. I came out like, I don't know, 4 years ago. Like, it is funny because it's like, how the fuck didn't you know? 3 girls named Anna went down on you. Three, right? Like,
all named Anna. Sounds like you have a type.
Yeah, I no, stay away from no. Me and Anna's have problems. That's I can't. Anytime there's an Anna involved, I'm like, I gotta go. I got a sage. I need it. I need to go put a clear quartz in my window somewhere. We gotta cleanse some shit. I don't know. There's a bowl I gotta fucking rub a stick on. No, I'm trying to write jokes about coming out, about queerness, and about specifically about being bisexual and the experience of locker rooms. Like, all these fucking right wingers are afraid of trans people attacking people in locker rooms, and it's like, dude, do you have any idea how terrifying locker rooms are for the LGBTQIA plus community? It's just like, eyes up constantly, eyes up. Okay, no, I didn't want to see those. Those are not the boobies I wanted to see. There's a lady with they're just out in the locker room, and I'm not doing this. It's you, right? Just to have to do this all the time, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of good comedy coming out, and I can't wait to see more of it, and maybe write some of it. That'd be sweet.
Very cool. Well, is there anything else you'd want to touch on that we didn't talk about?
No, thank you for talking to me for like an hour and a half. Appreciate that.
I wasn't sure, looking at the questions, if we'd take up a full hour, but we're already over that. So I appreciate you giving your time generously. And why don't we end then with where people can see your photography and find you online?
Yeah, sure. You can see me in a couple of places. You can see my photos on onsitepublicmedia.com or on our Instagram or Facebook pages, which is at Onsite Public Media. My personal forward photography Instagram is at @forward_photos_Minneapolis. That's really all I have for my forward. Eventually I'll get a website here, but I'm kind of lazy. So,
It's hard enough to even keep up with editing your photos and, all of the stuff. So, yeah.
I have 3 jobs. So it's like 3 jobs, pool leagues, all the photography stuff. It's I don't know if I ever really sit down for that long.
Well, you've sat down for an hour and 15 minutes now in your bathroom with great acoustics. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks
Awesome.
so much for being with me today on this show. And I appreciate your sharing a lot of this information, including very personal stuff. I really, really appreciate you doing that. And we'll see you in the streets.
Awesome. See you in the streets, Brad. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but the beauty a rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this.
You can support Red Lens Podcast by supporting my Patreon. Go to patreon.com/SiegelPhotos, SIGALPHOTOS, and sign up for a small monthly donation. That will go a long way in helping sustain the podcast and my work as a political photographer. Thank you for checking out and supporting Red Lens Podcast.